missing Commissioner Schrum.
Should be right.
Okay, there is. Okay.
There he comes.
Okay, we're coming back to agenda item number 12, Commission Regulation 393, bear hunt permit regulation. So at this point, I'm going to bring it back to the commission, and we'll have commission discussion before we vote on the regulation. So, Commissioner Rob, or Vice Chairman Rob, thank you.
Before I get started, I'd like to thank Hal Taylor for his comments on independent agents up here. I realize that, and that will reflect in my comments. Billy Howard in saying that there's some common ground, and he did spend some time with Hunter yesterday to understand his viewpoint. Maybe that Hunter went away understanding your viewpoint a little more. I think discussions like that go a long way. In considering my decision I'm going to make today, I read all the emails, listened to the testimony, looked at the science, talked to multiple biologists, a lot of phone calls to people in state, out of state. Really did my homework on this so I can make an informed decision. But what I really had to look at was myself, why I'm here, and look at my own core values, because that's how a person makes their decisions, is on their own core values of what's been presented to them. In looking at my core values, I look back at a letter that I wrote to Governor Quinn 6.5 years ago when I tried to get on the commission the first time. And that letter specifically went into the future. I wrote it, and after I read it, it looked like I was putting in for Dave McNinch's position as a conservation representative. I represent sportsmen in the seat that I'm in, but I consider myself as much a conservationist as a hunter. I thought back to the conversation I had with Governor Sandoval about this appointment that I'm currently in, and that was again about the future, about conservation, and about my love for the state of Nevada. As a sportsman representative, it is my position to ensure maximum opportunity for the sportsmen of the state of Nevada. With maximum opportunity, it doesn't mean taking maximum number of animals. It's giving opportunity at a quality hunt, at quality game, and not having an impact on that game. Maximum doesn't mean maximum take. The other thing is, I look at my two boys. They're the 5th generation of my family to call Nevada home, and I want more generations to do that also. I'm here for them. I've stated that multiple times on the record, that I'm here for the future, for my kids, for my grandkids. In thinking about that, I look at both sides of this issue, and I see a lot of passion on both sides. And I understand the passion on both sides, being a conservationist and a sportsman. My conservationist role has primarily gone down the path of bighorn sheep. I love bighorn sheep. I love watching them lamb. I love watching them rut. I love building guzzlers for them, doing projects for them, spending time with them. But another thing I love to do is hunt them. Because I hunt them does not mean I do not respect them. I respect the sheep as much as anybody. But I'm there to help them out. And in saying that, I look at Carl Lackey. Carl Lackey believes in this hunt. That does not mean Carl does not respect these animals. I think Carl respects these animals as much and oftentimes more than anybody in this room. So with that being said, you look at Carl's record. He didn't get on BBC, Discovery Channel, the Today Show, multiple publications, the newspaper on a regular basis because of the bear hunt. He got there because of a passion for bears. Carl is not going to do anything that is going to have a long-term detrimental impact to the bears. I can say that without a doubt. I know the commissioners up here and most people in this room do not know Carl as long as I have. I knew Carl at Reno High School. I've known Carl for a long time, and I have no doubt in Carl's honesty, credibility, and who he is as a man. There's been discussion on peer review. I believe there's been a ton of peer review, from Carl to his boss, Mike Doble, who is very well respected, Rich Haskins, very well respected, Ken Mayer, very well respected. The state of California knows as bear hunting is going to occur with bears across the state line. I think if the state of California had a problem with this, that's a peer review we would be hearing from today. That being said, my decision will be based today upon science that I believe in, and I know that the science is not going to do anything, and we have science monitors. We routinely shut down bighorn sheep hunts if we do not have the population stable enough in that area to continue that hunt. We've shut down sage-grouse areas and areas that either get too much pressure or do not have a population to sustain a hunt. And the other thing, I hear a lot of public safety concerns. I would not make a decision that would endanger any citizen in the state of Nevada. I'm a lifelong Nevadan, I love this state, I love the people of this state, and there's no way I'm going to make a decision thinking it could hurt any one of you or any one of your kids. So with that being said, I believe that I'm going to be voting in favor of the bear hunt today, or bear regulation, permanent regulation, so we can look at bear hunts on a yearly basis.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chairman Rob. Commissioner Maureen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of many good things that's come out of this long discussion is the comments actually that have been made by the anti-bear hunter general group. Specifically, I mean, there's been many, but like those were brought forth by Mr. Hopkins, Mr. Schwamberger, and Kat Simmons, and various others. You know, and one thing I point out is, you know, it apparently appears to the public that this body has various different reasons for supporting this regulation, and I would think that would be absolutely accurate. On a 9-member commission, you're likely to have at least 8 different ideas. You know, one person might be supporting it because of a totally different reason than the other, and that doesn't mean that, you know, one reason or the other is less valid. If we didn't have different reasons, then you might have cause to worry. You know, and some of these points are brought forth. You know, do I necessarily believe every decimal point of the biology that is out there is correct? No, not necessarily. However, do I believe that the biology far exceeds the bar that is necessary to pass the regulation? Absolutely. You know, opposition does make some valid points about different models and perhaps they're lacking in certain ways. And, you know, I don't think these models were ever necessarily pointed out to be precise. That's why they're called models. Both sides basically have stated, you know, they're inherently wrong within certain parameters. However, they're highly useful tools and hold validity when measured and compared with empirical evidence, such as the overwhelming body of such empirical evidence that has been presented by multiple sources in this case. And we've heard them all, you know, from different individuals. Mr. Lack is principal among them, but there's been many other sources of evidence as well. And so when those models are compared with that evidence, they give that model some validity as well. Public safety issue has been a huge one in the anti-bear hunt movement, shall we say. And I state, correct, you know, I have 4 small children between the ages of 1 and 11 years old. They're 6th generation Nevadans. You know, and it's my opinion that they are in far greater danger of unhunted bears than they ever would be from hunters or hound dogs that have quite an experience with the different hound dogs, and they're not vicious beasts by any stretch of the imagination. As has been presented, you know, I'd argue that hunting season is a very safe time to be in the mountains, comparatively speaking, You know, I've personally been in situations where I've been able to help out individuals that were not hunting out in the mountains when I was out pursuing such activities, and it's likely that the reason why some people are around today, other people have been around, it happens all the time. You know, my reasons for supporting the hunt are primarily the biology, because it's far more than sufficient to warrant a hunt. Perfect? Perhaps not. Probably never will be. It's a social science. However, it's far more than sufficient. And secondarily, I think that, you know, public safety is likely to be enhanced by this. I'm quite a bit worried about, you know, what could happen to an unhunted population of bears, the brazenness. I'm really worried about people that are term the bears to be virtually tamed. I mean, we've seen bears, black bears, killing people in other states, killing children in Utah. Many attacks that have occurred in other areas, black bears specifically. That's a significant danger. We need to watch out, and you know, there's a chance that to some degree, hard to say to what degree, but to some degree, in, some of the training, this might be a way of putting it, to the bears might be useful in this case. And there's other reasons. Thank you.
Commissioner Drew?
Might as well just keep going right down the line. This is obviously a very serious issue, and I've got a job to do here today, and I take it very seriously. And I think it might be a little easier for me to define what my job is because it's laid out by state law. My decision today is not going to be based on money to the department or anyone else. It's not going to be based on precedent. It's not going to be based on the protection of an individual or any individual group. And it's not going to be based on intimidation. What my decision today is going to be based off is what I discussed in my disclosure, and that's NRS. 501(1)(a)(1) outlines the duties for this commission, and it says the commission shall, and I'll read it right out of here. The regulation must be established after first considering the recommendations of the department, the county advisory boards to manage wildlife, and others who wish to present their views at an open meeting. Any regulations relating to the closure of a season must be based upon scientific data concerning management of wildlife. The data upon which the regulations are based must be collected or developed by the department. So that being said, the biology. I believe in the biology. I've looked at all the letters that have come in concerning the biology, the white papers, the position papers, and the supporting documentation. There's been a lot of calls for third-party review. What you've got to realize is that the model and the analysis that was conducted and run was done so by Dr. Sedinger with UNR. And I've had a little bit of a leg up in that when I was at UNR studying wildlife and conservation of populations, I had Dr. Sedinger. And what his class focused on was learning how program MARC runs. And I can tell you with the utmost confidence that Dr. Sedinger is one of the best respected population dynamics professionals in the country. So I think there is an element of third-party review. At the same time, I think Carl and the department has done a very good job of collecting that data. For the last 82 years, as some people have pointed out, the department has preserved and protected the black bear in a very strict sense of the word. I think it is very exciting that we're to the point now, because of an expanding bear population, that we're even considering a management option. One of the management options or issues that has not been discussed that I think needs to be on the table is a potential problem we may face with limited habitat in the face of an expanding population. And I believe that's one of the reasons we need to look at all of our management tools. In terms of the county advisory board, a lot has been made of wildlife belonging to the people of the state of Nevada. I believe very strongly in that. The county advisory boards represent, in every sense of the word, the people of the state of Nevada, statewide. They are responsible to uphold that duty, and they are accountable to their constituents and their individual counties. At this point, from what I've seen, there have been, every county that has spoken on this issue has been in support of it, and there has been none opposed. And the third part is the public, and that shouldn't go unstated. I hope the public remains engaged in this process. It helps us to make better decisions and better adaptive management decisions moving forward. I also had some safety, I won't say safety concerns because I know sportsmen, but I had some safety questions when this hunt was first established. I took the time to come to the Endow Bear Indoctrination. I thought the department, both from the game side and from the law enforcement side, did a very good job in that indoctrination, in that they read every regulation that ensures public safety when hunting, directly to the sportsman. And they went over the maps of where you should and should not, or could and could not be hunting. So it was very clear that the department took the necessary steps to make this as safe as possible. All of that being said, approval of a permanent regulation today does not mean we're going to have a hunt next year. It doesn't mean we're going to have a hunt the year after that. In fact, the next time we have a hunt, if we have a hunt, it may look radically different than the one we have now. And so my support for the general regulation today does not mean that I will support every hunt hereafter. That decision will be based on those three parameters moving forward. So again, I thank everyone for their time and effort, including the department, its biologists, and everyone in the audience and the cabs who's taken the time out of their busy schedule to address this important issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Drew. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you. I guess we're going around the table. All right. You know, I've sat here and really struggled with how to present. We are all in our unique positions one way or another, and you know, I struggle with the need for a group like No Bear Hunt Nevada and people that are anti-hunting or even not pro-bear or proponents of a no bear hunt, to walk out here with a vote of some kind, a vote to indicate that they had some success, that they were being heard. And what I guess my message is that you've been heard loud and clear. And I want to relay to the commission. I had an opportunity to meet with several members of No Bear Hunt Nevada, and I can tell you that our meeting was very cordial, it was very respectful, and I very much appreciate that. That was there were opportunities for a great dialogue, and I learned a lot about the group, the organization, their concerns, and you've heard a lot of those things here, and I very much appreciated that opportunity. During that meeting, I let those folks know that, and how this is kind of in response to some comments that you had made on the record. There are some concerns as I dig into this stuff and as I get up to speed on it, coming on new for this go around. I'm not a bear biologist, you know. I got to get up to speed and I got to understand some things. I got to read the information. There's no doubt in my mind that there are things that we can continue to do to develop our database. There's a lot of data out there. I trust the data. But having said that, I think that there's some information gaps. I mentioned yesterday my questioning with Dr. Beckman with regards to the wildland bear versus urban interface. It might be challenged. Why didn't we ask the next question? Do you trust it? Well, I didn't want to do that. I considered that. I got what I needed out of that, which is there's still need for information gathering. So anyway, back to my meeting. The mentioned to the group that I was likely to, unless something really came up that would sway me, likely to support this permanent bear hunt, not as an endorsement. Or, I'm sorry, the permanent regs, not as an endorsement of the hunt. I made that very clear in my meeting, and I make that very clear here. Things will be very different for me if they stay the same between now and February. Right now, my tendency would be to not support a bear hunt in February as part of our season setting. I'll make that loud and clear. Do I think that this is the place, getting back to Hal, your comments, do I think that this is the place to set the feet and make that statement? For me, it's not, and there's reasons for that. Voting against the permanent regulations today, I believe, could limit some opportunities that we might have between now and February. And when I say that, I'm thinking specifically of we have various interest groups that have convictions, and with few exceptions, we always try to peel the fat off of those convictions, people's convictions. We never specifically ask people to carve into their convictions, you know, to take a chunk of it away and get into things that deeply. We're there on this issue. Somebody's going to have to cut into convictions to make things happen somewhere along the way. in order to get there, I think we have to keep opportunities open. So, you know, and I floated this with no bear hunt before. I floated it with a few of the sportsmen. I think that by closing the door on the permanent regulations right now, we lose the opportunity to consider things like doing away with the draw like we had it this year, where you have 45 tags and 20 bear quota, and maybe open the door for heritage tag / dream tag, silver state tag, PIW, where you might have 4 tags. It kind of accomplishes it, providing opportunity with the concept of calming the waters a little bit. Floating that out there. I guess I'm throwing these things out. We all want solutions, and I really do believe that everybody's going to have to cut into some convictions somewhere on this one. And it's going to be a tough step for everybody. If it doesn't happen, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I don't think anybody's going to win. I think that we all stand to lose a lot. We're going to have to cut into those convictions. I don't think the permanent regs is the right place to do it. I certainly think that in February you'll see my approach change unless there's something that comes up different. I think that we do lose some opportunities to work together if we don't pursue them a little more aggressively. I do think that there's room to talk about not hunting in the basin, season length, possible quota reductions as a form of calming the waters. I think everybody needs to give each other room to breathe. I've seen a lot of reactions to perceived activities or perceived positionings. There's been a lot of, I think everybody needs to give each other a little bit of breathing room, a little opportunity. I do agree that implementing a hunt, I'm not feeling as pressured time-wise. I do agree that we should take some time to do this stuff. I got a lot of notes. There was a lot of suggestions thrown out there. I'm trying to sift through. I think that that's where I'm at right now. I think that we really do need to provide our opportunity. I would very much support and hope that we might have some kind of a group, core, open-minded folks that can sit at the table and have some discussions on issues, including alternatives. See if we can get somewhere to at least put a stopgap between now and maybe something that's more permanent down the road, more of a more collaborative, I guess, in that sense. That's what I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner Finch. Commissioner Walls?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start off by saying I sit here and I may not ask a lot of questions. My way of thinking is I listen to the facts and I take that information and I look at it. And I don't need to ask a question if someone else has already asked it twice, because it's just being redundant in my opinion. And I would rather have time to listen and look over the information and make a decision. And I don't want to base anything based on money. And I don't feel that any of this has ever been based on money. And when we first set up the temporary regulation, the quotas were very conservative. That was the decision that we made, was to start conservative. And I don't think that we've ever planned on going any farther than that. And by making this a permanent regulation, it allows us the opportunity to lower the quota, raise the quota, whatever we feel we need to do based on the science. And I trust the department's science, and I trust that we, as the department, hire the best people for the jobs. And I have to thank Mr. Lackey for a great presentation yesterday. And I haven't seen the numbers move around whenever he's given us a presentation on the bears. The way he explains it, it always comes back the same information to me. I mean, everyone has a different interpretation, but when I look at it, and he comes back with, for example, he says that we've marked 310 bears. Well, to me, 310 bears marked. If we had a small population of bears, we would have had some bears taken that were marked. And none of the bears yet have been marked. And that's where I'm at on this. I'd like to see it as a permanent regulation so that we can manage the bears. They're the only one right now not being managed in the state. And if we have the opportunity to manage them, we may not have a hunt. There's nothing set in stone, but a regulation that we're going to hunt every year. As Commissioner Drew said, we may go to a zero quota. That's why we look at it on a year-to-year basis and set the quotas. Because we can't just say, oh, we're going to hunt this many bears year in, year out. This is what it's going to be. And there's always a need for more information. And as the information comes back from the hunt and the studies, it's an ongoing process. And I support making it a permanent regulation. And I support the department and their science. And that's where I'm at on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Commissioner Schrum?
Mr. Chairman, I've listened to all this, and one of the problems I have is that these folks have moved into an area that is black bear habitat. Sooner or later, there's going to be a disaster, and then people will be up in arms saying, why didn't we do something? How did we let this problem come about? I can't imagine, I cannot fathom how a person can go ahead and consider a black bear a cuddly little Walt Disney cartoon. Black bear is unpredictable. You have an animal that ranges from 200 pounds on up. Their responses are entirely different from ours. You can't take one and turn it. I've seen the cartoons. I've seen we have a television program called The Bear Whisperer. This guy goes out and he has, beats on culverts with a baseball bat and the bears run off. But in the background, there's also a gentleman standing there with a shotgun loaded. We have a disaster just waiting to happen up there. These little black bears are not cuddly things. They're nice to look at. They have immense amount of power. And I believe that I'm going to support this regulation because I think that we have to do something, and we have something in that, and I think this will give no bear hunt more leverage in the future to come back and come to the department and say, we need some help here. But we're going to have to do something soon. We either do a resolution now, or we wait till fall happens. I don't think that's fair to the people who live up there, because they moved up there and they like it, and they like being around the bears, but you have to accept the fact that a black bear is not like your puppy dog. It's therefore, we'll have to go ahead and support this resolution.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Sum. Commissioner Howell?
When the chair is ready, I'm ready to make the motion.
No, I have something to say before you do that.
I do that.
Okay. And as the father of the bear issue, bringing bear hunt, to the commission and to the public, I will allow you to make that motion. So anyway, do you have anything that you'd like to add with regard to your decision? Okay, you're a man of few words. Okay. Okay. I do have some comments, and mine are going to, the principal thing I want to talk about, was some of the legal basis for what we're doing. I'm going to be a little bit above what Commissioner Drew talked about. He talked about specifically our authority to pass the regulation, what we need to do specifically to support it. But there's been some other issues that have been raised with regard to our overall, policy directives in approving this, and what our obligations are under Battle 1. So I want to talk about that. But before I do, I want to address a couple of the specific items. First of all, Commissioner McNinch mentioned going forward and having both sides come together in a collaborative process of some kind to deal with some issues. And as we've gone through this meeting for the last 2 days, I've jotted down some of these items, and they are in no particular order. The only order they are is the order that they came, that I wrote them down as they came in. some things I think we ought to discuss. There was some discussion of a no-kill pursuit season for the hounds, and so I said, well, wow, I've seen some writings on that, and maybe that's something that we can do to deal with some of the some of the issues we have in trying to get these bears trained to maybe be a little bit more afraid of humans. Transplant of bears into historical range. This one is huge. It has a lot of issues involved with it. I saw the map of potential areas that we could be transplanting bears to, and increasing the population throughout the state of Nevada. I was very excited to see all the different areas in Nevada that we could do that. It's something that we've done with respect to bighorn sheep, antelope, a number of different species that we have, and so I'm very excited about that. Obviously, Commissioner Vogler's in here, and I know there's some issues with regard to agriculture that we need to deal with if we ever do anything like that, but still, it's something that we should be dealing with and talk about. Probably the biggest one is the urban bear problem. I mentioned that I feel that the urban bears are in a killing zone, and whatever this commission can do at the state level to get the communities that have not done what they need to do to solve this bear problem, and killing these bears in these urban areas, to be quite honest, appears to be much worse than what this hunt could ever do, in these areas. This commission needs to put it as one of its highest priorities to move forward to, try to get something in place. There was mention of bear paws to add to the regulation with regard to gall bladders. I think that was the idea that we need to discuss. All of these need to be vetted out. I'm not saying we're going to do them. They just need to be discussed. Congested areas in the Cabo Basin. That one is probably highest, one of the highest on the list that person that's come up here with regard to the conflicts between two recreational groups, recreational users of our public lands. Another big one, wildlife corridors, and continued study of the corridors between Nevada and California, and what we can do, to limit development, or at least manage development. We need some private lands that are in there that we need to maybe look at acquiring, and to protect these corridors. I mean, these kind of issues like that. Season dates was one of the last ones that was mentioned today, and I jotted that one down. Maybe pushing the season back. I think it's a great idea to get it past Labor Day, and where we do that, I don't know. And there are some coordination issues with the state of California. I know that we talked about when we actually set our season dates, and so those kind of things. So anyway, going forward, I agree. I imagine this list is not all inclusive. We'll probably have more items to put on it, but anyway, that's one. Obviously, my base decision, like everybody else that's here, is the science, and obviously the critical issue that we're dealing with on the science end of things is the population estimates, and whether we have a sustainable population, whether it's growing. Mr. Taylor made the comments that that we need to look at everything, and we do. And as an attorney, when you're in a process, whether you're in a courtroom or whether you're in an administrative proceeding, and this is kind of quasi, administrative in that respect. We all have to weigh, the facts as they come in, and the science is presented to us. And so, in my mind, my principal reliance is on the study that the people that were involved in the study, Carl Lackey, Dr. Beckman, Dr. Settinger, and the gentleman that was maybe predated, all of them, it's all relevant. And looking at all of that, these are the guys that were gathering the data, who basically put it together, put the model together, made the, through the MARC program, and obviously not being a scientist, I have to, absorb this stuff and try to reiterate, and understand what it's saying. And I have a certain amount of trust in those guys that they're basically doing this in the utmost professionalism, and as I stated yesterday, I absolutely believe that. And so I have weighed, the additional information that has come in from the other side, and it does not tip me. For instance, we got a letter from the Sierra Club and it cited certain information. And when you first read it, you go, wow, this is a credible organization, and we really got to listen to it. And so we see the study that was cited in there and who wrote it. And so I looked at it and said, wow, this is interesting. I need to pay attention. And so I did. But then comes along a letter from SCI with 5 exhibits attached to it, which, again, I read all of that too, and it put into conflict the study that was done in, I think the gentleman's name is Tabs. SCI had actually been involved in the process in New Jersey and dealt with this individual study, this very, very study that's being cited by Sierra Club. And when I read that the gentleman who did the study that SCI was citing was out of the chemistry department, and I read the study, the response that was written by the bear biologist, one of the preeminent bear biologists in the country, that was retained by SCI to respond to it. I came away saying the more credible study is the gentleman from SCI. And so I have been through this process. As an attorney, this is what I do. This is the way my mind works. It doesn't. I don't turn off my legal process when these kind of things are coming at me. And so on the science end of things, I am absolutely confident in what we have here. And as I've said many times, I think that Dr. Gutman's letter lays out a roadmap for this department to take to continue to do the science to support this science. And so I'm, in the future, I hope that we're going to continue to move down that road to further support the science, behind this. Okay, so now moving into what I consider our obligations as a commission, and as set forth in NRS. And I think that where we need to begin are the legislative directives that this commission has been given. And so what I'm talking about is that our legislature, we're a body that is created by statute. NRS created this commission, and NRS gives us our charge, basically tells us what it is that we are supposed to do. And so the very first section that comes to mind is NRS 501-100. And this has been cited many times by a lot of the parties that have come forth, including the bear advocates. Section 1, wildlife in the state is not domesticated in its natural habitat as part of the natural resources belonging to the people of the state of Nevada. This is a public resource. This natural resource is public for all people. We get it. We understand that. And next section says the preservation, protection, management, and restoration of wildlife within the state contribute measurably to the aesthetic, recreational, and economic aspects of the natural resources, of these natural resources. Okay, so in effect, what is that? And as Carl stole my thunder yesterday, it basically embodies the public trust doctrine. And he cited the Martin versus Wardell as a Supreme Court case going back, I believe, late 1800s, early 1900s. That's how long this doctrine has been in place. And basically what it says, it actually involved the riverbed of a waterway that the people that were fishing it uncontrollably basically felt that there shouldn't be any involvement from the state, the states that bordered that waterway. And the United States Supreme Court came back and said no. Said the wildlife belongs in trust to the people of the state. In the story. Now, yes, that's been eroded. The Endangered Species Act, Migratory Bird Acts, anything federal that involves multiple jurisdictions, so there has been erosion of the public trust doctrine for purposes of state law, all to the good. One thing that I want to point out is, and in addition to NRS 501-100, no bear hunt is cited NRS 501-105, which has the same language. And the critical language here, and this is really what I'm going to be going over with you today, is preservation, protection, management, and, in the conjunctive, and restoration, all four. What I find when I read the position paper of NoBearHuntInNevada.com is the emphasis on the first two, preservation and protection. That's where they stop, and that is not what the statute says. The statute says preservation, protection, management, and restoration, all four. Not two, all four. Moving on. Right after NRS 501-100 is 501-102, legislative direction regarding hunting. The legislature declares that hunting permitted by law in this state is a valuable activity in the management of game mammals and game birds. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but that linkage is direct from 501-100 to 501-102. It basically says that for purposes of preservation, protection, management, and restoration, as to the management component, it says as a legislative directive, the hunting is a valuable activity in the management of game mammals. Moving on. NRS 501-110 basically requires that all animals be classified. And so the statute reads, for purposes of this title, wildlife must be classified as follows. Wild mammals, which must be further classified as either game mammals, fur-bearing mammals, protected mammals, or unprotected mammals. Okay? By regulation, the former commission, NAC 503-020, have classified black bears as game mammals. Now that was done, I believe, and this might have to be confirmed, but it was done in 2002, and the reason they did it back then is because they wanted to make sure, we're going to the protection component, they wanted to make sure that black bears, that anybody who illegally took a black bear, killed a black bear, receive the stiffest penalties that we have under law, and that is by classifying them as a game mammal. And so that's what we did. Now, you know, when No Bear Hunt looks at our statute, or whether it be 501-100 or 501-105, which both have the same language, the same four areas that we need to be concerned with on wildlife management, what you need to understand is that when any court of law is going to look at us, you know, interpreting what that statute means, they're going to look at the entire statutory scheme. And what we have here are 5 NRS chapters. We have 5 chapters, 101 through 506 that we deal with. We have Administrative Code Regulations 501 and 505. In effect, what that does, what those statutes and regulations do, is it implements the North American Wildlife Model. In other words, our legislature has told us that to meet this legislative directive that we have to, again, going back the words, preservation, protection, management, and restoration, the way we do that is through implementation of the North American Wildlife Model. And so I think it's important that we look at that model. And I'm going to look at this model. I did it last time. I made my statements, and I concluded with a phrase that it's made me famous. Okay, and I have no problem with that, because I absolutely stand by it to this day. Okay, maybe at the end of this I might change one word, but I do stand by it. And so let's look at the North American Wildlife Model, and this is just in a broad stroke. We view wildlife as a sustainable natural resource. We look basically at the entire population as a resource that we're going to manage. And so for purposes of the public trust doctrine and meeting that charge, we are not necessarily, and I want to be careful that everybody understands, we are not necessarily thinking about that from the standpoint of the welfare of an individual animal. Now, if you want to, if you think that you want to kill an individual animal in the state of Nevada, then I don't know the guy back there with the stars on his thing, he'll have something to say about it. Okay, so I don't want me to say that when we look at our management decisions from the standpoint of the population, that we don't also look at it from the standpoint of individual animals. We certainly do that. However, the key component of what we do is the management of this wildlife resource through sport hunting. That is our model. And we practice a concept called sustainable yield. And so what we are doing is we are trying to determine, the very first thing that we have to do if we're looking at a population that we're going to have, we have to determine is there a portion of that population, the sustainable yield portion, that we can harvest to support, our conservation program that we have. And as many people have said, that is not necessarily the issue that is involved in this permanent regulation, but that is the process that we do every spring that involves taking in a tremendous amount of information, surveys and modeling and all kinds of things that are done on every year to try to determine what the populations of all of our game animals are before we make a decision on the quotas. Sport hunting supports NDOW. We've had a number of commissioners, before I spoke, talk about it isn't about money. It overall is about the use of wildlife and sustainable, basically harvesting these animals and harnessing the demand that sportsmen have for these animals to basically run an engine of a program that is supports everything we do and meets all of those 4 requirements that we're talking about. It provides a funding source through license sales, tag application fees, tag fees, special fees paid by sportsmen. Habitat fees is one of the other fees. Provides funding through the Pittman-Robertson Act. That's the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act at the federal level. It's an excise tax on ammunition and sports firearms for the game animal piece. There's also a separate act that deals with fisheries, so I won't deal with that. NDOW's operating budget for 2011 is approximately $36 million. That's just the operating budget. The total budget, when you consider all other things, is higher than that. But for purposes of this, $36 million. Sportsman's portion of that, 98%. $35,280 approximately. NDOW's budget from the general fund of the state of Nevada, from the rest of the taxpayers of the state of Nevada, $720,000, 2%. That's what all the sportsmen talk about, is that they fund this program. And as has been pointed out, sportsman organizations providing additional support for this wildlife resources. All of the groups have been mentioned: Nevada Bighorns Unlimited, Fraternity of the Desert Bighorns, Safari Club, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, Wildlife Habitat Improvement of Nevada. That's basically a habitat group of hunters, and there's many more. And as Mr. Harris from the Clark County Gap pointed out, is that there is incredible amount of hours put in by these individuals, just donating time and other direct materials that are supplied by others, in support of wildlife. So it goes even beyond, the licenses and the excise taxes and all that it goes. So bottom line is, NDOW, through the support of sportsmen, are the stewards of Nevada's wildlife resource. And I would love to see conservationists get more involved and within money and time in actual on-the-ground projects that benefit wildlife. I'd love to see that at some point in time. So when I look at our statutory mandate, again, going back, reservation, protection, management, and restoration, let's see how NDOW and sportsmen and our model, our North American wildlife model, stacks up. Protection, NDOW law enforcement, game wardens, a statutory scheme for fines and penalties for people who violate laws of protection of wildlife. monitoring the species under the Endangered Species Act, management of state and federal public agencies for land use planning and development. NDOW is there. In these public forums, basically advocating for wildlife interests. Development protection strategies for habitat and wildlife. We have, I believe I have an overall wildlife plan, and we have plans for every single species. Management plans as to what we do for both, game specifically to their habitat, projects that we do. So protection is a big part of what this the agency does. Preservation, development of wildlife management areas. Through bonding and other sources and donations, we have acquired land, usually ranches, that are turned into wildlife management areas that support wildlife, support viewing the wildlife for not just hunting, but for any other non-consumptive use that people want to use them for. Preservation and the advocating and protecting open space and wildlands and wildlife corridors. And then, again, management under the Endangered Species Act and the preservation component. Management, NDOW Game Division, wildlife biologists. We commit a tremendous resource of scientists to the management of wildlife. Wildlife Habitat Division. We have a division that is devoted to habitat issues on both our wildlife management areas and on public lands. In this group are the experts that anytime any kind of a project on public lands comes up, and we'll see some two of the items on our agenda today for the water project down south for the Southern Nevada Water Authority, as well as some actions that are going on at the Sheldon. We're involved. Management also involves the fisheries division. Again, maybe not as relevant to our bear issue, but trap and plant removal is one of our management functions, as is obviously sport hunting, the biggest one, the one that we're talking about here today. To manage population through sustainable harvest over time. Management through data obtained through sport harvest. As we've said many times, that one of the science, it's not just about taking the animals and that's the end of it. We get feedback on almost every single one. We require our hunters to report back data that is used in our modeling process. And specifically when it comes to bears, they have to bring in the hide in the skull, and obviously we're gaining data, good data from that in the management arm. The restoration component. NDOW Game Division, Trap and Transplant Program. We take excess animals from certain areas and we repopulate areas, historical range and non-historical range, to try to maximize our populations. We're trying to increase these populations, and so again, additional restoration habitat fees. We have a habitat fee that pours in to restoration projects, fire restoration, and other habitat development projects. So when it comes to meeting the charge of our state legislature, this agency and the sportsmen of the state of Nevada meet it overwhelmingly, without a doubt in my mind. And so now, I have to honestly, when I analyze this, say I'm now going to compare that to what I have termed, and I don't know who else termed it this, but the model that I think that Bill Bear Hunt is proposing is what I call the individual animal welfare model. And this is my analysis of that model. It focuses on the welfare of individual animals and advocates not killing animals and other non-lethal methods with little regard to sustainability of the population. Based on an emotional and oftentimes irrational attachment to the individual animals at the expense of population viability. Advocates and emphasizes non-consumptive uses of the wildlife resource. Now understand, our model allows that as well. It doesn't emphasize it, but it allows it, and in fact increases those opportunities in my mind. Has no funding at the state or federal level. Organizations seek funding from the public mostly to oppose any action that they believe harms individual animals with no investment in habitat conservation or management. funding used to oppose sport hunting through legal and legislative actions. Focus on ideological versus ecological principles. So ultimately, I reject a model that does not meet Nevada statutory directive and 501-100, and this is why. Protection, none. Preservation, only by not killing individual animals, but nothing to sustain total populations. It fails preservation in my mind. I mean, you're not going to agree with that, but that's the way I look at it. Management, none. Restoration, none. By eliminating sport hunting, this model and the people that support it assume the killing will stop. I find that an incredibly naive assumption. If you think the killing is going to stop, and if our model goes away, think long and hard about what's really going to happen. Because I really honestly believe that when we look at this, that when you look at these two models, it becomes a lot clearer as to which one we should be following at the state level. Okay. This morning I jotted about, I didn't have all my materials, I left them at the director's office, and so I jotted off some additional notes down on the pads at the hotel room at 5 this morning. So I want to move on and talk about what this commission needs to do today, and drill in a little deeper to when we talk about the public trust doctrine. What that means, when we talk about trust under law, it means that we have trustees, and trustees have an obligation. It's a fiduciary, what they call a fiduciary obligation to the trust principle. And in our case, our trust principle are the wildlife resources of the state of Nevada. So we as commissioners have a fiduciary responsibility to determine which one of these models is in the best interest of the wildlife resource. That's what we need to do. We need to determine which one of these models is going to best protect this wildlife resource. Now, I have just gone over to you and weighed the two. So ask yourself, which one is in the best interest of this wildlife resource? Ask yourself, and I've already done this, which of these models meets the statutory charge under 501-100 and 501-105, which is preservation, protection, management, and restoration. Specifically, which one of these models best conserve our bare natural resources? In my mind, the answer is absolutely clear. In addition, I want to specifically answer some of the questions. And Carl did this as well. How can killing bears conserve them? And I've laid out the North American Wildlife Law, and I believe it answers that question. Harvest, plus or minus sustainable year, depending on our objectives, drives the objective to meet specifically 501-100, which is our definition of conservation. So to me, how can we conserve bears? We hunt them. We hunt them because they're part of an overall wildlife management program and process, the North American Wildlife Model, that in the long term is going to protect that resource without a doubt. Another question. Many of the bear advocates have made great efforts to go out and get signatures and basically come to this commission and say that the public is mandating that we not do this bear hunt. In other words, making it what might be called popularity contest. In other words, or something democratic that basically says that the most people who want something to happen, or who basically are vocal enough to bring it to the attention of this commission, that somehow the majority rules. I would submit that we have a fiduciary responsibility, and we must base our decision on the facts, including the science, in support of population estimates, that best meets our statutory and legislatively directed charge under 501-100 and 105 to preserve, protect, manage, and restore. We should not succumb to pressure from certain portion of the public if to do so would not meet our fiduciary trust obligation to the bare natural resource and the people of the state of Nevada. How should you vote? How should you individual commissioners vote? I'm going to pick on specifically two because they've sat in seats that are the most relevant to this decision today. And we've already heard the way they're going to vote. But the conservation rep should support the bear hunt, and I'm glad to see that he did. I wasn't sure where you were going on this.
The regulation.
Regulation, excuse me, the regulation. Because it is part of conservation plan, and I don't believe the other model is. Commissioner Schrum has taken a lot of heat because he's the public rep. In my opinion, the general public rep should support because the rational junk Q public should realize that of these two models, the preferred model that best conserves the bare natural resource and provides most wildlife opportunity for the general public is the North American wildlife model. And as to the rest of us, I believe all of those principles apply to us, whether it be a sportsman's rep or ranching rep or farming rep. So, I hope I've answered the question that has been posed as to what our legal obligation is. And based on that, based on the science, and based on everything that I've seen here today and yesterday, and over the more than the last year that we have been dealing with this issue, I have only become even more convinced through everything that I've seen, and I really do appreciate the vigorous analysis that everybody's done to vet all these issues. I've become even more convinced that we need to support this permanent regulation and the permanent bear hunt that is going on, and like as everybody said, it's going to be a year-by-year process as we go forward. Okay. So anyway, I will be supporting the bear hunt. Okay, Commissioner Rock?